Get it? Yeah, I got it recorded. All right. Joining us now on the Same Old Stripes podcast. He's a beautiful football mind. Lots of great insight on the cap. Lots of just good football talk in general. Odd and I could talk on and on and on about football all day long, but he's an NFL analyst over at Player Profiler, which is a part of the Rotoworld network of goodness. He's a former salary cap expert for the NFL, and he is on Nanduri. And we are very excited to have him back on the show today. I can't believe the last time we talked was before the Super Bowl. It's been way too long, but man, how are you? How's life? And how's the sort of end of the offseason feeling for you?
What's up, Willie? This is one of my favorite times of the year because you kind of get to sort through all the pieces of what every team has done, right? Because we get super excited about free agency, then we get excited about the draft, then we get excited about, undrafted free agent signings. There's just always the NFL's found a way to have a 365-day-a-year media cycle, and it's great for all of us that create content like you and I do. But this is my favorite time of the year where we get into mini camps and OTAs and training camps, and then we finally get to, all right, you've done all of this work between the early February and now. What are you on the field? So I'm super excited to be with you. I can't believe it's been, almost 15, 16 months since we've gotten together. But I'm happy to be back.
Yeah. We'll have to make this happen again soon. We'll probably do this in I don't know. We'll figure it out at the time on the calendar.
At some point.
We talked about this. But I think that you kind of set up our conversation perfectly, because what we're here to kind of talk about today is a topic that I think a lot of Bengals fans have near and dear to their hearts and minds. And I think it's just a little bit of being so close and yet feeling so far away at times. And that is what it would take for the Bengals to finally get over this Super Bowl hump. And you have a very interesting perspective on all of this, and we'll get into all of that. But I think we can kind of start this conversation and I want to talk about the contenders as a whole, just to kind of frame the conversation right. So if we're kind of looking at the AFC, which is obviously just getting stronger and stronger by the season, or the offseason, I should say, for whatever reason. Now we're just going to drop Aaron Rodgers onto a loaded Jets roster. Sweet. Just super convenient for all the other teams in the league. That's very nice of you to do. But from your perspective, who are the teams that we realistically can win the Super Bowl? It's May 23rd. Injuries are going to happen. Aaron Rodgers, tweaked his calf or whatever today in Jets camp, but I think he's probably going to be fine for training camp. So your thoughts on this topic? I mean, who are the contenders in the AFC? I mean, just in general, who can win the Super Bowl from your perspective right now? And that's a loaded question because things change.
Things change really quickly, especially when you're talking about. So before we go into that, everybody that's at home, especially the Bengals fans, I want you to understand what you lucked into at the time you lucked into it. So we can make the argument between Mahomes and Burrow. Burrow's beaten him 3 times to Mahomes is 1. We know Patrick is a generational talent, done things that no one else can do, seen sights no one else can see. We're talking about arguably the greatest start to a career ever, right? So if you just exclude him from this pot of quarterbacks, right, you're talking about Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Pickett, now Aaron Rodgers, Tua, Mac Jones. All 4 quarterbacks in the AFC South are relatively new, other than the established Trevor Lawrence, right? And then you go out to the West, and then you have the wild card that is Russell Wilson and the question mark that is Jimmy Garoppolo in this Raiders offense. And the thing that has to be ultimately comforting is you have one of 2 quarterbacks that have been there and done that exactly where they are. Rodgers did it. That was almost a decade and a half ago. You're talking about what amounts to basically lifetimes ago in the NFL. So if we're talking about the true immediate contenders, to me, it is still the same 3 that it's always been. It is Bengals, Chiefs, Bills, in whatever order you want to put them. Some of it's going to be how healthy do some of the pieces that they've signed long-term coming back get. Von Miller for the Bills is a great example of that. Another part of it that you're going to ask yourself is how close to their relative peak are each of these quarterbacks going to play? We know what happens when Allen plays at his peak. He is among those guys that can really push at Patrick Mahomes. We've seen the same with Burrow. That's the question that I have of the Lamar Jacksons of the world, of the Justin Herberts of the world, of the Trevor Lawrences of the world, who I have all the faith in, right? But they haven't done it yet. And so until they go do it, I struggle to add them to that tier of 3. But again, we're looking at a conference where quarterback play is as good as it's ever been in any conference ever. So I think the question that you're asking is tough because all it requires is getting this much better for any of these teams or any of these quarterbacks to really push themselves into that discussion, much like Mahomes forced himself into the discussion when it was Brady, much like Burrow forces himself into the conversation when it was Mahomes, and then Allen obviously forced himself into the conversation again. But I think it's those 3 teams, and then there's a tier break, and then there are the elite AFC quarterbacks that are not in Cincinnati, Buffalo, Kansas City.
Yeah. And frankly, you set up my next question just wonderfully. So I'm very happy you did that. But I think the way you kind of take this, the fans down the path, it takes one of these guys elevating to all of a sudden have another contender in the AFC. And that's kind of the scary part for, if you're one of these, Chiefs, Bills, Bengals. What if all of a sudden, Jacksonville really takes that next step and Trevor Lawrence takes that huge next step? What if we see another gear to Lamar Jackson's game that we haven't seen yet, especially as a passer? I think he's a tremendous passer, but I think that there's even, more things that we could see from Lamar Jackson with, Todd Monken coming in and taking over that offense, for example. And so that's all it really takes. And I think that kind of sets it up perfectly. I mean, at this point, I think the 1 seed in the AFC is becoming one of the most coveted gems that you can earn in the NFL. And the Chiefs learned that, it didn't happen the year before for them, but, oh, wait, no. Did they have to go into Buffalo? Yeah, they had to go into Buffalo. I'm trying to remember. Did they get the number 1
They've
seed?
had back-to-back 1 seed since they've had Pat.
That's insane. Good God.
Yeah, I mean, look, Willie, when you talk about these things, right? we're trying to frame the conversation for people, and it's really easy for Bengals fans, especially, to forget where you were 2 years ago. You have an established floor now of a 2-year sample size with Jamar Chase in the lineup, with T. Higgins in the lineup, without Jamar Chase in the lineup, without T. Higgins in the lineup, multiple safeties, multiple corners, multiple linebackers, different edge rushers. The one constant the last 2 years has been number 9 is pulling the trigger. And the established floor at this point for Cincinnati is we will be in an AFC championship game, and we will at worst be hoping that we get one possession to either tie or win the game. And that is a floor that no matter what sports fan you are, you're going to live with. If you're in conference championship games with a play or two away from getting to a Super Bowl every year, we know it's a weird sport. It's an egg-shaped ball, one tipped ball here, one weird call there. Everything could look drastically different, but that's all you could ever ask for in Cincinnati or in Kansas City, in all honesty. Anywhere you go, that's all you can ask for is be in the mix near the end.
So this isn't in my notes, but you got me going in a direction I think is really interesting. We're talking about the difference of one possession, one this, that, or the other. I think for Bengals fans, the one thing that they wish they could have had one offensive lineman not going down, one of the 3 going down the stretch, not going down. But I kind of want to talk about the way, the Chiefs and the Bengals in particular, the offensive line shifting, because I think those pieces could end up being a very interesting way the season plays out. Have you had time to think about, Orlando Brown Jr. going to the Bengals and then the fallout of what happens for the Chiefs, who have now added Donovan Smith, kind of a scary proposition at left tackle based on what we saw in 2022, and that might be being kind of nice about it. And then Jawan Taylor, I mean, it sounds like he's going to play right tackle now, but maybe going to play left tackle. I mean, just kind of how did you view that kind of formula? I mean, for the Chiefs in particular, how does that sit with you? That's kind of, I think, where I'm trying to go with this.
So Kansas City has proven over and over again, and Cincinnati has too, to an extent, that they're going to be fine without elite offensive line play. So we can argue until we're blue in the face whose line is better, how much better they are. But both guys have proven subpar offensive line, I'm going to carry a team further than you can with an average offensive line. If you give me an average offensive line, I'm going to push you relatively towards a Super Bowl. The question that we have, right, the question that hasn't been answered is if we give ourselves 3 years from 2020, knowing what these quarterbacks are and building out offensive lines in front of them, what can they be? right? There's that last little bit of, is there something left in the tank that Burrow and Mahomes haven't shown us? Can they go to that one level higher that no one else can get to? Because the only one, like we've seen year in and year out, the only one that can get to the level that those two can get to in the AFC has been Josh Allen. And the thing is, and the argument that's been made for why Allen deserves to be in this conversation is, I don't think his O-line and his weapons have been what the other two have gotten. But again, you're talking about a comprehensive picture of 11 guys, right? One offensive line is going to be the best of the 3 1 year. One receiver core is going to be the best of the 3 1 year. One tight end room is going to be the best of the 3 1 year. It's not going to be the same every single year unless you get a T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. And obviously, Cincinnati's had the wide receiver one on lock for a while. And obviously, KC has had the tight end room on lock for a while too. But I think the really fun part about the next evolution of what this AFC race looks like is we don't know that we've tapped out the top end of what these guys can look like. And if we get a better game than we got in the 21 or 22 AFC championship game, or any of those games at Paycor or Arrowhead, or even if we got a better game than we potentially got in 2021 in that divisional game between Buffalo and Kansas City, if they can tap into one level higher than that, we're talking about some of the best quarterback play we may see in our lifetime. And again, circumstances are never going to be ideal for an NFL quarterback. It's very rare that you don't have someone that's out. But with Cincinnati in particular, again, you just got hit with really bad injury luck last year at the position that you invested the most in the offseason. And that's a really unfortunate confluence of circumstances that you have no control over. Someone's going to get hurt. You want to have depth. You'd ideally like to have 2, 3, 4, 5 draft classes of guys that you've stacked together. You know what kind of depth you have. You have a couple of guys that you've re-signed and had an offensive line coach go through over and over. But now instead, it's just, hey, we are accidentally in this Super Bowl window because we drafted a quarterback from the heavens, a wide receiver from the heavens, and another wide receiver that probably would be the wide receiver one for 15 to 20 teams in the league. They didn't plan for that, right? Like that wasn't like oh, hey, let's drop these guys in and we're going to be a Super Bowl team. The window just materialized and now they're trying to maximize it, which is really interesting because that's not at all usually how this goes.
And it's funny, I was just listening to the Athletic Football Show, and they were talking about teams that have bad process, good results. Cincinnati Bengals are definitely in that bucket. Being terrible is not like a good process. That's not just like, we're just going to logic our way into like being really, or just going to suck our way into being really good. NFL teams don't think that way. That is not typically the way things go. That is not the way football players respond. So, yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that. That's really interesting. I'm trying to think. I had a really interesting question in my head about the Bengals. You know what? I've got to ask you about Nick Scott because you're a Rams fan. When the Bengals signed Nick Scott, you had me a little. You reassured me a little bit. I didn't know what I was getting. I lost Von Bell. He was very near and dear to my heart.
He's a Buckeye. It's hard to let him go.
It's not easy, man.
Yeah.
You know it as well as I do. But give me your breakdown on Nick Scott. I mean, he's not going to directly replace Von Bell, but obviously the Bengals drafted Jordan Battle, who can play some, down in the box as well. Nick Scott, he didn't play as much in the box with the Rams. He played a lot of free, didn't he?
Well, I mean, Nick Scott is one of those guys that just seems to be in the right place at the right time. You can't really put a price on it because it's not like he's a Minkah Fitzpatrick, like all-world safety by any means. And again, the Bengals don't need that. Lou Anarumo has never required that kind of safety to operate his system and to be effective. He's proven time and again, you lose a corner, you lose a safety, you lose a linebacker, you lose an edge rusher, and the system makes up for a lot of it. Now, obviously, you want A-plus players at every position if you can get them, but safety is one of those spots where if you're going to go into the free agent market and you're going to invest to some extent, what you want is a guy that can outperform the number that you're paying him. And I think Nick Scott is a perfect example of a guy that did more for the Rams than will show up on the stat sheet because there are so many stars around him. Whether it's a Jordan Fuller or a Jalen Ramsey or, an Aaron Donald, a Von Miller when he was there. There's so many guys that take up so much of that spotlight that he never really got spotlighted, I thought, the way that he should. really good football player, instinctive, tough, doesn't miss games. There's a lot to like about him at the number that the Bengals got him at. And I think you're going to look up probably week 10, 11, 12. He's going to make a couple plays that are going to have people asking the question, why wasn't he talked about more in LA? And I think a big part of the reason is that was just a defense full of stars, whereas the Bengals are a defense full of B plus, A minus guys that aren't going to get national spotlight. It's not like we talk about Trey Hendrickson as one of the best edge rushers in the league, despite the fact that his numbers would tell you he probably belongs in some of those conversations, maybe not all of them, but belongs in some of those conversations. It took until Jesse Bates started doing some superhuman stuff in the playoffs when the scope was narrowed a lot for people to actually start to understand, oh, hey, this is one of the premier safeties we have in this league. And again, you're hoping that Dax Hill, Jordan Battle, Nick Scott can come together and form some of what that was. Because again, you're talking about now year 4 of Burrow and Higgins, year 3 of Burrow and Chase. How much longer do we need to see them together to understand their floor is here, right? Like, we don't know what the ceiling looks like because, again, we're talking about year 3 at the moment for Burrow and Chase. But we're talking about a floor that is basically, we're probably going to host an AFC divisional playoff game with a really good opportunity to get to an AFC championship game. Basically, every year we are hoping that if everybody stays relatively healthy, we need to win one game to get to a Super Bowl. And that's about as much as you can ever ask for as an NFL franchise. And when I say that, ask a Rams fan, ask a Niners fan, ask a Seahawks fan what it's like to be in a division like the NFC West, like the AFC North looks like right now, and have that be kind of the floor of what you expect for your franchise. It's a really special time to be a Bengals fan.
What a time to be alive, brother.
Yeah.
And it sets me up for another reason why it's a great time to be alive for a Bengals fan. You reminded me what my question was that I was trying to set up, because we were talking a little Lou Daney. That's where I wanted to go with all of this. I mean, with one of the central question of this being about how the Bengals get over the hump, I think that for Bengals fans, I don't think it's lost on us that keeping Lou Anarumo in town was a big part of keeping this window. And the window with Burrow, it's always going to be, open to an extent. When you have one of these elite quarterbacks, there's always going to be a little bit of a window. It's kind of the reality of the situation for a lot of these guys. But keeping Lou Anarumo in town, to you, how much of that do you think has them remaining in this conversation? Do you think they'd still be there without it? Or, if he left for Arizona or whoever else could have hired him?
I think it's one of those situations where familiarity is a great thing.
Yes.
I'm thoroughly surprised that they kept either Brian Callahan or Lou Anarumo, and beyond shocked that they were able to keep both. Simply because you're talking about two guys that have, for the last year, established the same floor that we've seen, right? You're talking about a Super Bowl where if Burrow gets half a second more, you're potentially talking about a banner hanging in Paul Brown Stadium. Yeah, think about that for a second. That's a real thing.
That you can't say that with a grin on your face knowing your team won. That just hurts my feelings.
The other point too is you have to, the acknowledgement on both sides is, right, the Bengals and the Rams getting to that Super Bowl as 4 seeds, they kind of arrived a year early. We expected that window to open this past year. And that's just what it is. It is very rare that you win the Super Bowl that you're supposed to win. And so as we talk about these windows, what is it going to take for the Bengals to win? Keep getting to that last 4. I think that's more indicative of future success than winning one Super Bowl is. Because I promise you, the Rams are not getting into that last 4 this they're not. And I think the Bengals will be in that last 4 again. And as long as you get to that last 4, again, we're talking about a weird game where randomly kickers matter way more than they should at times. You've got random punt returns and kick returns that matter way more than they should. You've got Jamar Chase grabbing a ball on 4th and 6 that no one and their mother has any right to throw. I don't know where they came up with that idea. Still to this day, I still don't understand how that worked out. But again, when you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, sometimes it's just going to work out. As long as you keep getting to that championship game over and over and over, you're never going to feel stale in the sense that, hey, we're probably never going to get to the Super Bowl, because historically the teams that have gotten there, on the AFC side. In our lifetime, the Pats used to consistently get there. The Colts used to consistently get there. The Steelers used to consistently get there. And within time markers, the Ravens used to consistently get there. And if your goal is to be one of these franchises that can keep getting to that last four, again, no one thought Cincinnati in 2021, or sorry, I guess early 2022, was going to go into Arrowhead, go down the way they went down, come back and win that game given those circumstances. But the fact that we know they can do that now gives us a lot of confidence going forward that, hey, if they have to go to Buffalo, we're not scared. If they have to go to Arrowhead, we're not scared. If they had to go to Baltimore, we're not scared, right? This team has been built so that they can go anywhere, anytime. And they're never going to be embarrassed in the playoffs, which is all you can ever ask for, assuming that everybody stays healthy. That's the biggest question that anybody has. They just haven't won the war of attrition yet in terms of health along the offensive and defensive lines. And at some point, if you keep getting to that last four, they will. And I think that's when they're going to get over the hump, is when the injury bug hits someone else harder than it's hit Cincinnati.
Hear that, Bengals fans? Just hope for a little more luck with the injury guys on the offensive line, because they are cruel.
I mean, Willie, look, we've talked ad nauseum about how great we think Burrow is. And I think everybody in their mother would acknowledge how great Pat Mahomes has been. The only time Mahomes and Burrow have looked somewhat mortal is when their offensive lines have been below replacement level. Yes. We're talking about Mahomes in that Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, and we're talking about Burrow in situations. The one that sticks out to me the most over any of them, not the Super Bowl, not the AFC Championship game. The one that sticks out in my mind is that divisional round game against Tennessee and Jeffrey Simmons, where I'm just sitting there. I don't know how they're going to run. I don't know how they're going to throw. I don't know how they're going to do anything. And they threw everything to the wind and said, hey, we have what we think is the best receiver in the game. We have at worst a top 3 quarterback in the game. Let's just go let them do what they do. Offensive line, running back, tight ends, be damned. We're just going to do it. And the fact that they can have that as a play, especially late in a playoff game on the road, has to be terrifying for everybody else in the AFC.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it right there. The Bengals floor is still terrifying for everyone in the AFC. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Anand, you've been a fantastic guest. Do you have anything you want to plug before you go?
No, man. I mean, Matt and I do a podcast called The Decision Point for Rotoworld, playerprofiler.com. The draft kit will come out. Obviously, any fantasy football fans, go get that. But, we have fun doing the shows that we do. And obviously, I love engaging with Willie on Twitter as often as I do. And, the other Bengals friends that I have, whether it's Lindsey Patterson, whoever it is, on the Bengals side of town, because obviously that's home for me, right? I'm an Ohio boy at heart. And, I always hope that, the hometown team will bring one home. So maybe 2023 is the year that the Bengals do get over the hump, get that number 1 seed, get to have an AFC championship game at Paycor. What a scene that would be. But if nothing else, I'm always going to root for Burrow. I'm always going to root for Jamar. And we'll be back at some point to talk Buckeyes too, because I know you're a big fan.
Yes, sir. Well, my friend, it's been great having you on the show. We'll talk ball again soon. Make sure you give him a follow. Oh my God, I can't do the mirror. There, it's over there. You'll find it. If you're watching the thing, you see his Twitter handle. You better follow him. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks again for coming on the show, my friend. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Take care, Willie. Good to see you.